So we've realized by now that I have an addiction to painting wooden toys for my kid. And now that she has a little train set, it's time to make some buildings. I wanted a whole city's worth of buildings, but I needed them to store smaller because my wooden toys are getting out of hand. And this genius little idea is going to give me a whole city's worth of differently sized buildings that all fit within that big one. I want the scale to make sense across all the boxes, so these littler ones are going to be like a barn and some houses, and I guess the big one is going to be a skyscraper? They can stack, but I'm going to need help with this little one because my very smallest one is house, smaller house, garage, and then this tiny thing. Anyway, I didn't want to go too overboard. I wasn't going to paint the insides with like interiors or anything, but I was going to give them the little rainbow treatment because you know I cannot resist that. This way they don't have to be played with like buildings. They can be cups or stacking things or little boxes because babies love those. I painted that biggest one pink all the way down to, one more, the littlest one pink. It might be a little challenging to keep them all within the same scale, and it'll be weird to have a bunch of little buildings in a big old skyscraper, but I guess that's the way it is. I am going to start out with a basic house in this little orange box, and don't forget, I still need help figuring out what this tiniest square is going to be. We are painting tiny city buildings for my daughter, and we're starting with this small house in a Cape Cod style. Cape Cod is one of those housing styles that is perfectly suited to a perfectly square cube object. I mean, I could try, but I couldn't very well do a McMansion style in a perfect cube. I sketched out my design roughly with pencil, and then I used a ruler and a black pen to outline it. This way I can paint over top of it and still be able to follow those nice straight lines because it'll show through a little bit. I'm going to stay consistent with the color of my windows throughout the whole project because it's supposed to be reflecting the sky. The color is technically a very light blue, but it ends up looking gray in context. That's okay though. It's just like my beautiful hometown of Salt Lake City. Only in this city, nothing's going to smell bad and nobody's going to get lung cancer. I thought yellow would be really cute for the outside of the house, but still realistic. And then, of course, I added some siding, and I did this with a Posca pen and a ruler. When the siding was drawn in, I could go around all of the windows and make sure they looked nice and straight and square and clean, and they had a white trim. Most of these windows are in the size of some multiple of a 1/4 inch, and the door is 1/2 inch wide and 1 inch tall, and I'm going to try and keep that scale throughout the entire city of buildings. To draw all this out, I actually used a clear quilting ruler because it is super easy to make sure that all of the angles are nice and square. I went around adding details and plants to the building, which means that you can tell that this is owned outright and not rented. I don't know if there's a single landlord in the world that would let one of their buildings look this cute. Painting this little house was a double boost for my mental health because the roof was turning out so great, even though it should have been complicated with all the gables. And I was imagining the person who lived in this house just like really loved and appreciated their home and didn't want for anything else and just loved gardening and just felt really satisfied. Maybe they were an old person or maybe they were young with a family. I was just loving it. In any case, the house turned out really pretty and has character, so I'm feeling great. I made sure to cover the whole thing in a nice coat of child-safe sealant. And given that I was originally working with a plain wooden cube, I consider this house a success story. And I'm very excited to get on to the next one, which will be a little bit bigger. We already painted one little house, and we're going to do another. This box is bigger than the last, but I wanted to keep the scale the same. So I went for another roughly cube style of house because I'm trying to pack plenty of residential space into this city. This is, after all, a fairy tale, and so, of course, there's plentiful housing. I got a little bit more creative with the sides of the house, including some bay windows and stuff like that, because I didn't want everything to be so same. And it was such a fun coinkydink that the colors that I'm going to use are Oyster White and Cape Cod. On this house, I did the siding first and then did a very light coat of paint over the top of it, and I think it looks perfect. We are back at it again with the window color that looks as though your city has bad environmental policies. Though as the mayor of this fictional city, I can assure you they are 110% renewable. Since there's nothing cuter on a little house than some non-functional shutters, of course I added them, but the color I chose did tend to make the sky look even grayer. If you watch the video very carefully, you will notice a sweet little quirk of mine wherein when I get really focused on something really small, I start to breathe heavily out of my mouth. And if you heard it, I'm here to tell you that actually no, you didn't. And thank goodness for that. That would be embarrassing. I gave up on detailing the shingles after I achieved what some might call Minecraft oak log texture. And then I went on to adding all those little details all around the house that makes it look nice and cute and lived in. I couldn't paint small enough to do the types of wildflowers that I think would look so cute in a garden that belonged to a house like this, so I had to settle with some nice green shrubbery. But don't worry, I checked with the owners and they're native. Can you believe that they found a wedding ring growing on the carrots in their garden? It's absolutely amazing. I told them they should have called the news station. In the meantime, they've definitely restored the original hardwood floorings, and they probably have a handwritten recipe framed from their grandma in the kitchen. If I lived here, I would line all of the hallways with overcrammed bookshelves, and I'd probably hang lace curtains in all the upstairs windows. If that were my real life, I'd be really happy, but in this universe, I'm just going to coat the entire house in some kid-safe sealant. Stay tuned for the next time when we do another larger box. We've made 2 of our little houses so far, and now it's time to get to work on the school. Except this didn't end up being a school because I totally screwed up the placement of the windows and decided to make it a little duplex instead. I was so proud of this idea. I was like, oh, it reflects my values. I love it so much. Of course, we still will be doing a schoolhouse, but I just needed to kind of regroup a little bit. I didn't execute properly. Now, I know this duplex does not seem like it should be a duplex because the buildings are completely different styles, but I just couldn't choose one, so I did both because this is my fantasy world, so step off. I actually live in a duplex right now, and I really like it because I've got plenty of space and a lot less guilt, and I think it's really great for my kids to grow up around other people. You learn to be courteous and neighborly and friendly. And if you're painting on a cube, then you can say, oh, well, you can only see one side at once, usually, sorta, so I'll just make another entrance over here because what is there to lose? And of course, I added a little tree because I wanted to make it very homey. I really think it's the little details that make a place look really lived in. When I first started in design school, I thought that I really hated clutter, and I really thought it was a shame that interior design was bound by all these functional items. You couldn't really hide a stove in your kitchen, it was so functional, and I hated the look of it. I was really into minimalism and clean girl aesthetic and stuff like that. But then I kind of realized one day that isn't it kind of amazing that we have all of these little things? Whenever I go to a historical site and I see all of the things inside those old little pioneer buildings, I'm always so fascinated by the things that they use in their daily life. And I don't know, one day I just decided to apply that fascination to the things I use in my daily life. Just decided to stop taking for granted that I can turn fire on and off in my kitchen, and I have a little pot on my windowsill that was pressed out of plastic in a factory and come to me. It's kind of amazing. So since the other side of this apartment reminded me of one I used to live in, I decided to add a bunch of things outside that my neighbors used to have. Because the trash on the curb and the pots that don't match and the umbrella bound up is evidence that humanity happens here. Our little ant colony of people coexist here, and they go to the store and they pick out a little pot that they really like and they buy it and they smile and giggle and they bring it home and they plant their plants in it. It's just so cute. So maybe my little duplex buildings don't match each other's vibes at all, but it's better than the school that I think would have gotten here, and we will get to the school eventually. But for now, I think it's time to change gears a little bit and do a different kind of building. We've painted a couple of our mini houses now, and I think it's time to change gears. The perfect building for something a little bigger than a house and a little smaller than a duplex is a barn. Toddlers love barns. This is the second barn I've painted for my kid just this month. My grandfather owns a ranch, and he always had 2 barns, one that was more of a garage for his tractors and the other one for the cows to give birth in during the winter. I've reflected both of these types of barns on this one by putting an entrance on either side. Of course, it also wouldn't be a barn if it didn't have random junk sitting outside along the edges, including trees, old plows, and stuff like that. Of course, my favorite thing to do on the farm was to play on the hay bales, and so even though my grandfather did not store his next to the barn, I made sure to add some to mine. He used to keep all of his hay bales in a big stack, and we would climb up them and jump across them. They were 6 feet across and 6 feet tall, something like that. One time, me and my little sister were playing on the hay bales, and we were only about 2 hay bales tall, I believe, and she fell in between a grouping of 4 of them. The bales are packed tight. It's really dark. You can't squeeze out of them, so we had to lift her out from above. And looking back, it's probably really dangerous because you don't want anything to fall on her. You don't want her to get stuck. And all the adults are freaking out, but I thought it was kind of funny because she kept squeaking down there. She wasn't too upset. She couldn't have been more than 4 years old. We had to get a lasso, and we tried a human chain. We tried all sorts of things to get her out, and we finally did get her out. And of course, because she was stuck down there in all of this hay and all the dark, and it's pretty tight squeeze, she was covered in the stuff when she got out. So we get her out, and we're walking back to the house to clean her off and to check her over, and we're walking past the pasture where the cows have come up to the fence because there's people to watch. And this is where she finally starts to cry, and she's crying, and everyone's trying to comfort her. They're like, it's okay, you're already out. And she says, no, the cows are going to eat me. They think I'm hay. And I don't care what you say, that's just so objectively funny. I was giggling my head off as like a little 10-year-old, and all the adults were so mad at me, but it was funny. Even after that, I loved to play on the hay bales, and I also loved to see him shred them with his tractor and give them to the cows in the winter. I love the hay bales, so I'm so glad that they turned out so good on this painting. Sometimes I paint something and I'm like, I can't believe I did that. This shading's crazy. I painted this tree to honor the windbreak line, and I made sure to add the garage door half open with the cat coming out. I loved playing in the row of trees, and I loved finding all the kittens on the farm. It's just nice to look back on my time at the farm with good memories, even though at the time there was no Wi-Fi, no movie, no toys, like lots and lots of work to do, but such is life, and a good change of pace for our paintings. It's the perfect size to go with the other ones, and we've done a nice hearty set now. It's time to go on to bigger buildings, which I'm afraid might not have the same 3D effect types of roofs, unfortunately. We just finished painting our little barn, and now it's time to move up a couple of box sizes. 2 buildings ago, I tried to do a school, and I screwed up the placement of the windows, and so I made it the back of a duplex. And this time, we're going to go in with a school and try and convince ourselves that we like it. I've seen so many houses during my childhood in suburbia that those were really easy to come up with, but for these bigger buildings, I've been taking inspo pictures in the big city. I am painting this box with the purpose of being a school, but I do want things to be open-ended enough that she can play with it a different way if she'd like, and I'd also like them to kind of be homogeneous enough that you could stack them on top of each other and still be like a larger building if you wanted. In the middle of painting these windows, I had a lovely little spill all over my table, which only added to the amount of time this building took. Doing all the straight lines of these windows right up against each other took forever. I wanted to add a little bit of texture to the top section, and so I added these lines, which of course ended up looking a little bit like siding. So maybe this is a school, maybe it's yet another condominium. The thing that really made this building winner of the time sink contest was making brick all along the bottom. These clips here are sped up several times, even though they look kind of slow, because making those lines really crisp and clean so that I could draw each individual brick took me forever. I wanted brick though. I love the brick and stone buildings. All of these buildings that we make nowadays are made of plastic, and it's so obvious. With all this vinyl siding and faux stucco, I'm surprised we don't all just blow away in the wind. Now the trick with these bigger buildings is going to be making them look homey and lived in and have fun plants and things on the street without also making it so that they can't stack on top of each other. I thought I wanted this school to have a playground, but I'm a little nervous in how I'm supposed to draw it so that it looks like it works on the ground floor or also on a terrace. I want to add some trees and plants somehow, but they have to be able to stack still. After I cleaned everything up with the trim, I got a little bit nervous that it still looks too much like condos, especially since I added these balconies. But the building is beautiful, and it does look more schooly from the other 2 sides. Anyways, I need help deciding what I'm going to do with my playground, and I want to be able to add some trees and shrubs, so please leave me some suggestions. We painted our little school last time, and I asked for help breaking it in, so to speak, and you guys had some great suggestions for along the bottom here so that it would still be able to stack on top of other buildings and make a skyscraper, but also look like a school. One of the very first comments was a suggestion that we add basketballs to the roof, and I can't believe I didn't think of that. Throwing basketballs up on the roof was such a common occurrence that we were all afraid of the janitors who hated getting them down for us. I also added one of my own high school math teachers. I had him at the very end of the day, and he was known for going over and writing on the window with his whiteboard markers if we were getting restless. He was a super great teacher and a really good person, and everyone really loved him. So when he unexpectedly died the next year, very tragically, they had his funeral in the auditorium of the high school, and it was still packed. In more playful news, one of you informed me that I could, in fact, do whatever the heck I wanted with the playground, and so I did. There are apparently plenty of terrace and rooftop playgrounds, and I unfortunately did not see the comment suggesting that I do one of the medium boxes of the playground in time, so I did just draw it on here. I was also told to just put small trees in little pots along the side, and I was like, OMG, duh. I have, in fact, seen little potted trees at university buildings, and so I decided to do pots that look like the ones from my own school. I also went around and did a couple of little papers and things in windows. I added a flagpole and one of those rolling signs that's announcing that student-teacher conference is coming up. And as I was doing those basketballs on the roof, I was remembering the time that my cousins and I were playing capture the flag with one of those cheap plastic frisbees. It was the flag, you see, and so someone had accidentally thrown it up onto the roof of Grandma's house. And being kids, we had to do all sorts of weird human pyramids and piggybackings to get it off the roof. And when we finally got it down, my oldest cousin was so pissed that he threw it down on the ground and stomped on it with both feet, breaking the frisbee and making it all null and void. In any case, the school is looking rather schooly, all thanks to your help and comments. And even though it doesn't look actually like any of the schools I attended, it has so many fun little tidbits that it just reminded me of my whole schooling experience top to bottom the whole time. With the finishing of this school, we have completed 5 of the 10 buildings, which means we are halfway done. We have 3 more large buildings to do and 2 tiny, tiny, tiny ones. And since I received a complaint, feast your eyes upon half of our little city. I have received hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of comments asking for this tiniest cube to be a doghouse. But as you can see, it is very much too big to be a doghouse in relation to these other buildings. It is perhaps the right size to be like an Amazon Prime truck or something, but what kind of a fairy tale city am I building if it has a freaking Amazon Prime truck in it? We need to be thinking bigger. I have entirely every possibility in the world when it comes to my mini city, and you want me to have an Amazon monopoly in my fantasy world too? So no trucks of any kind. This mini city is walkable, which means everyone's mental health is fantastic, and there are crazy cute plants everywhere, hence the greenhouse. I actually think that a greenhouse is a great idea because you can put it in like the yard of a house, but you could also put it up on the top of a school or something and live out your like High School Musical dreams. I used to very, very religiously watch this one gardening lady on YouTube. I used to watch her videos every morning with my little chalky milk. And by the time she had gotten enough money to buy a Heartleaf greenhouse that looked like this, she was a little bit too out of touch for me to watch any more comfortably. In any case, I think a little community greenhouse is so, so cutie for my little city. And I would have loved to do like a free little library or something like that. But again, the size just wasn't quite right. And you could say, Camille, you already made the argument that this is your fantasy city and make anything that you want to happen. But the thing is, I want the scale to be consistent throughout because then it's more immersive. To you haters out there, I would say you obviously never went through your Disney Imagineering career choice phase. Because product design is not limited to objects. It is about the entire experience. But you're right that a little library or a doghouse would be so, so cutie. So I am workshopping some ideas for another project after these boxes. I am a little bit obsessed with painting tiny wooden things, as you know. So we'll have to get on that before my hyperfixations switch back to quilting for another month. In the meantime, if you are one of those that were passionate about the doghouse, have no fear, because this is actually not the only mini box left. There is one more whose purpose has recently been vacated. The little greenhouse is the smallest one though, and you guys were so right. It's perfect when it's finished, and it looks great as a little community garden or in someone's yard or on top of the school. It even has the brick on the bottom to match. Originally, this second smallest box was going to be a garage, but if I'm decentering cars from my city, what the heck is this supposed to be? That's lame. So make sure to leave me suggestions for this one. We've done a ton of mid-sized buildings, and it's time to move on to a bigger one. This one isn't really for any stated purpose. It is simply to go on top of the biggest one or to go below the school, which means it's going to be brick. And even though I just said it has no stated purpose, you can bet your bunions that it is not office space. That I know for sure. It is based loosely off of the Sullivan Building and also the Red Building Museum in Washington, D.C., along with the surrounding buildings. The brick is lovely red and it has some cutie little pediments and frieze. I know I literally just got done complaining about all the time that the bricks added to my school building that I was painting, but I kind of embraced it with this one and I got a lot faster. In preparation for all the tiny teeny work I was going to have to do, I just put on my audiobook and listened to it while I went. It was yet another questionably YA romantasy book where the female main character has special powers and falls for the morally gray, suspiciously coded male main character who has literal shadow powers. And don't ask me what the title is. They have all blended for me at this point. This has got to be like the 5th series. And after wondering on the trends of pop fiction books, it makes me wonder what this kind of thing indicates in our culture right now. Of course, I'm going off the premise that all of these are self-insert for your female reader. And I'm like, what is it with the shadow powers? Like, do we all want to think that our man is, like, secretly not evil? Or that he's, like, mean to everyone but us because we're special? Or, like, what is it, honestly? A couple of months ago, I had a man who was close to me read The Cruel Prince, and he just didn't get it. He was like, this guy is the worst. It's not morally gray. He's just, like, a terrible person. I don't like these characters, and I don't want them to end up together. And I was, like, shocked and appalled. Like, this is a great series to start into this kind of genre. It made me realize that there must be something in being raised a girl that makes you appreciate this kind of romance more than like a man would. Because if you're growing up watching princesses and Barbie movies, you've got these conflicting messages that being saved is really romantic, but also him letting you save yourself is really romantic. So you have to grow up holding space for your own conflicting feelings surrounded this and like billions of other little micro tropes. And anyone raised traditionally masculine has their best romance in like Star Wars or Lord of the Rings, and so their nuance just is non-existent. So, of course, I've been equally thrilled and bored by all of the shadow powers in the main male characters in the books that I'm reading lately, but at least I'm having fun. And then I did get the YouTube video from ContraPoints on Twilight recommended to me, and I loved it. I thought it captured so much of what it means to be a female reader. I was absolutely enthralled. So now that I've finished this giant red brick building whose purpose is unspecified, it's a good thing that I know just even a little bit of American architectural history, because otherwise I would be just bored and not equal parts bored and thrilled by this little brick building. It is both detailed and monotonous, a perfect contradiction and addition to the other buildings in my little city. A great backdrop to add to the vibes. We're moving on to the biggest building in our collection. I'm keeping it to scale, I'm keeping it stackable, and I did the outlines off camera. There are more smaller buildings to do, but I was in the mood for this bigger building. I opted not to go for one of those nasty giant skyscrapers and to instead go for a more classical look. This building is a museum, or a library, or a university. A pro-protest university, obviously. Maybe it has a concert hall inside. It definitely has those stone staircases that are like worn on either side because it's like been so old and everyone has stepped in those exact same spots on the staircases. It's a little bit echoey. The floors are marble. It's got some little science labs in the basement, and all of the shelving is definitely solid wood. This building is grand. It's got a train station named after it. It's been here forever. It's free to enter, obviously, and the gardeners are incredible. They somehow make it look old and classic and also cutting edge. And even though I painted in these columns, at this point I thought it was looking a little bit too corporate. And so I made sure to add lots of cutie little details and especially window panes. I made sure to do plenty of little details with more organic shapes. I literally went to the craft store and bought every single shade of gray paint that they had because I didn't really have much gray paint and I hadn't been to the craft store either in months. I used plenty of reference pictures, and if you couldn't tell already, they're definitely all Smithsonian buildings. And it's only fitting because much like the Smithsonian building, my basement is flooded right now. In fact, my basement has been flooded for 9 days. That sweet little basement of mine is almost entirely made up of my little craft safe haven, and so I haven't been able to work on anything, and it's been infuriating. Also, it smells, and it's damp, and it's really frustrating. It makes me feel dirty. None of my stuff has been damaged, but the house certainly has been. Every single morning, the landlord sends another plumber out to do an estimate without actually fixing it. Because remember, kids, being a landlord is not a job. It's a sin. Because in my opinion, if this little house of yours is not turning out to be a great investment, perhaps you should sell it. And then you can boo-hoo over your lost investment and your giant pile of capital. Whatever. Anyway, the whole ordeal has definitely got my crafts and plumbing on a standby, but at least my allergies are still going strong, thanks to all that little damp air. So I'll comfort myself thinking about all the specimens in this building. The sweet little old people in their offices and a man who's way too old to have a man bun. After all, this building was built before electricity, and the bathrooms are made for bougie selfies. There's a courtyard with little flower beds and fountains, and they do little exhibitions of endangered plants in there. Plus, I hear that on the 3rd floor, they've got a book that was annotated by Jane Austen herself. You could never in a million years convince me that the government should not fund the Smithsonian. In fact, I think that it should get more funding and that there should be a Smithsonian museum on every street corner. I used to think that nothing could make me quite so giddy as to see a museum with really high ceilings until I saw one that was also free to enter. After this month, you also could not convince me that plumbing should not get as much funding as it possibly needs, because right now my basement smells so much like aquarium, I'm dying. And if a Smithsonian were ever to smell like aquarium, you'd at least know that you were about to be greeted by a moray eel or something cool. Alas, I have no sweet little fish in my basement, but at least there's an excavator in my front yard digging a 12-foot hole. That's at least interesting. You can bet your bunions that when this is all said and done, I am going to clean this house top to bottom like my life depends on it, or like perhaps it is a marble museum at the Smithsonian. There are still 2 more boxes to be done in our city boxes collection. One is a 3-story building that will perhaps be like some New York City or row house style apartments. And the other one is that difficult little box that is smaller than a small house and bigger than a greenhouse. It could be maybe a chicken coop and run or something like that. I'm still looking at your suggestions and debating them. In any case, the buildings will be old and well-loved and detailed and full of perfectly useful plumbing. So we painted a little duplex already, and I've got a box that's slightly bigger that needs to be 3 stories, and I thought it would be perfect to do some like New York or row house style apartments with little shops at the bottom. Because I gotta be honest with you, multi-use buildings make me a little bit giddy. And unfortunately, like most multi-use buildings, they ended up looking a little bit ugly. Not quite as like cutesy and perfect as I wanted. But maybe that's par for the course for typical city dwellings. I grew up in beautiful upper middle class suburban Utah. And when I moved across the country to the East Coast and all these big cities, there was a little bit of a learning curve, I will say. And you know, they always joke that in Utah, if you're a brunette or a mom, you're kind of past your prime. And I never realized the truth of that until I moved over here and started getting catcalled like nobody's business. And unfortunately, I was ill-equipped to handle it. I was once walking downtown when a man in a nice suit and a nice Suburban pulled up and came out of his car and said, "You know, you're really beautiful." But homegirl had somewhere to be, and so she was walking very fast and did not slow down at all for this man. But remember, I'm like a week fresh off of suburbia, so I didn't want to be rude. So even in the midst of fast walking like an Olympian, I turn my little head to him and I say, "Thank you," in that exact Utah suburban voice. And he immediately pulls back and he goes, "Where are you from?" But I was mostly down the street at this point, so I just shouted back, "Here," nervously. And then not even a week later, I'm walking to the bus stop and this guy in like a sports car drives by and kind of pulls up and he goes, "You need a ride?" And I'm a little bit absorbed by, I'm moving and I've got places to be. And so I haven't really gathered that these men are harassing me yet. So I decide to assume that he's being like really genuine and just wants to help me out because he's obviously feeling himself in this car. And so I turn to him and I say, "No, thank you," in my perfect little stay sweet accent. And he looks stricken and he goes, "I hear that." And then he floors it. Now, I've since learned better, and so that kind of stuff doesn't really happen anymore. But it is interesting that that sickeningly sweet little voice scared them off so badly. Though maybe I, too, would be rather jarred by like a 5-foot nothing little white girl in a little Disney princess voice. So, I don't know. Whatever. I was very careful in choosing which shops to incorporate in this little building. I wanted it to be very community friendly. And I didn't want to do any recognizable brands, but that's a story for another day. I made sure to add a postal box and some ivy and some flags and some stairs and trash cans and stuff like that you guys have been commenting in other videos, along with a rooftop garden. I know you guys have been wanting to see that. So maybe my little city block on a cube isn't the aesthetic perfection that a little Utah girl would want, but it is perhaps closer to reality. So consider this your formal apology that there was no Bob's Burgers reference. And for those of you also escaping like I have, walk fast, look aggressive, make eye contact, carry a metal water bottle. And ignore people. Leave them alone. You don't always have to be judge watching people. Gross. The key to city life? Mind your business. Your own business. Famously too small to be a small house and too large to be a greenhouse, the last box is here. I was pretty sure that I was going to make this into a chicken coop and run. Until after that Smithsonian Museum / archive / concert hall / library / university building that we did. You guys were right that we needed some more cutie little shops and things. So I picked 4 types to do on each side of this building. This first side is a newsstand, which is kind of like one of those airport bookstores and also like one of those little souvenir shops that you see in those really big cities because it's got the hats hanging. I did not want to do any specific brands because this is my fairy tale city and monopolies don't exist here. And I mean, to say that things are dystopian is kind of cliche at this point. But what I will say is that I kind of cringe inside whenever I see, for example, those little Target shopping carts that Target sells for kids. That's so gross to me. That's definitely something that you would read in a dystopian book. It's really hard to be a fan of certain brands in this day and age because you have no idea what kind of crazy crap that they're doing. And of course, that is very funny of me to say, considering the little book series that I love that I included and also some little chip bags. But I definitely don't buy my kid any of those toys that are like mini brands because that is crazy. I mean, even when I give her snacks, I usually put them in a separate bowl because I don't want to describe them as their brand. I want to describe them as what they are. She's way not old enough to police herself when it comes to marketing. Which is not to say that you can't or shouldn't. Marketing is an art form, which I would know. And even all of that said, this little floral stand kind of looks like the floral section of a Costco. I do hold some space for Costco, admittedly, because I like their business practices. But I'm not going to go buying my kid Costco merch or putting Costco merch on their toys. That's weird. So, trying our best to avoid late-stage capitalism, I think the other 2 sides should probably have some food. The teeny tiny shops are cute, but we need some food. The classic example is ice cream stand and hot dog stand, and so we're going to do both of those. Of course, I am aware of both open-ended play and food allergies though, so we're gonna try and make it like not super specific. So this ice cream stand is just like a frozen sweet treats stand, and their logo is an ice cream cone. You know that classic line, how do you know someone's vegan? Oh, they'll tell you, ha ha ha. Well, I would argue, and I can say this because I'm one of them, how do you know someone's lactose intolerant? Bro, if somebody has a milk allergy, you are going to know. Those hosers cannot help themselves but tell you at every opportunity. I used to be one of them. I've been lactose intolerant since literal birth. And so when I was a kid, I would tell people. And now that I'm an adult, I just kind of like mind my business. Just don't eat ice cream? Question mark. Nowadays, whenever someone tells me that they can't have milk, I'm like, congratulations, you're not special. Now shut up. I've lived with this for 20 years. It's not hard to find other options. Come on. If you can still like eat breadsticks instead or have a popsicle or take a lactate, like keep it to yourself. Girl, if you've got an EpiPen, sure, let me know. But my whole family has different food allergies, and at this point in my life, I'm just like cynical about it. I'm so used to eating with vegetarian and gluten and milk and egg-free people. At this point, I just check for it at the restaurants. So this little hot dog stand is not just a hot dog stand. Any food item that can be vended, pretzels, hot dogs, corn dogs, burgers, salads, sandwiches, any of that comes out of here. And we're all covered. We're all covered, so no need to comment. You could just order your fries from this side of the building, and everything will be good. And now none of my extended family members have any need to text me that I forgot about their particular food allergy in my TikTok video. I'm thinking about you always. Literally, always you're in my heart. You never have to worry about me literally ever forgetting you exist. You're so important to me. Whew. So now we do a white tent top on top of this building. Those are the last sides of the last building. And now I just need to figure out how to edit a cutie little thirst trap for this set of buildings now that it's over.